lone rancher found his dying neighbor's abandoned mail-order bride freezing in the snow. The wind howled like a wild beast across the empty plains of Erythrine. Snow drifts piled high, folding the jagged terrain into soft, deceptive hills. Out here beyond the nearest settlement, the world was untouched by civilization. Or maybe abandoned. Gideon Harrow had lived in this isolation for years, a lone rancher on the edge of the frozen colony. His cabin, a sturdy structure of reinforced alloy and timber, was barely visible behind the whitewash of the blizzard. He knew every slope, every ridge, every creaking panel of his home, but tonight the storm made even him doubt his senses. Gideon pulled his coat tighter around his broad shoulders and squinted through the swirling snow. He was checking the perimeter of his small livestock pens when something unusual caught his eye. At first, he thought it was just another drift, a lump of snow shaped by the wind. But then a flicker of movement made him freeze. There, lying partially buried in the snow, was a human figure. "By the stars," Gideon muttered under his breath. He didn't expect anyone out here, not for miles. The nearest colony was over 300 kilometers away. And yet someone or something was out there in the storm. He kicked through the snow toward the figure, each step sinking into the icy powder. The closer he got, the more he could see. A woman, young, her hair matted with ice, her breath shallow and ragged. She was trembling violently, her body curled into itself for warmth. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, a haze of fear and confusion clouding them. Gideon's heart tightened. Hey, it's okay. You're safe," he said, his voice low but firm. He knew she could barely hear him over the howl of the wind, but he hoped the sound of a human voice might anchor her to reality. She shivered so hard he could see it in her whole body, and her lips were blue. Gideon knelt beside her, carefully wrapping his heavy coat around her shoulders. He brushed the snow from her face, noting the fine frost that had formed along her eyelashes. She was light, almost frail-looking, and he realized just how close she was to freezing to death. "Come on, you've got to get inside," he murmured, lifting her gently into his arms. It was not an easy task. She was limp and weak. The wind tore at him, biting at his exposed face, but he ignored it. Every second counted. He trudged back to the cabin, feeling the burn of cold in his legs and lungs, the snow clawing at his boots. Inside, the cabin smelled of smoke and old wood. Gideon had a small heater in the corner, fueled by the colony's low-grade thermal units. He placed her near it, wrapping her in thick blankets, and worked quickly to restore her warmth. The heater hissed and clicked, throwing weak but steady heat into the room. He poured a small cup of warm nutrient paste into a bowl and set it beside her. Slowly, she stirred. Her eyes blinked open fully now, and she looked around in panic, struggling against the blankets. Gideon held up his hands gently. "It's okay. You're safe here. Just rest. You're going to be fine." Her lips quivered, forming words that barely escaped. "They left me," she whispered, her voice shaking. Gideon tilted his head. "Who left you?" he asked. She didn't answer right away, just shivered and pressed her face into the blanket. Gideon sat nearby, letting her recover. There was something fragile about her, yet a quiet determination lingered in her eyes, even through the fog of hypothermia. Once she regained enough strength, Gideon fetched a small datapad from the table. It contained a partially damaged information packet. He fed it into the scanner. The text blinked slowly onto the screen. It identified her as Alara Voss, sent to his missing neighbor as a mail-order bride. The rest of the packet was corrupted. The message implied she had been abandoned, stranded far from any settlement, and left to face the brutal elements alone. Gideon frowned. He had heard rumors about settlers' dealings in mail-order contracts, but he had never seen one gone wrong so clearly. There were rules, regulations, but out here none of it seemed to matter. The universe didn't care about mistakes. It didn't care about lives lost in a blizzard. Alara's eyes caught the screen light and she whispered hoarsely, "I don't understand. Why am I here?" "You're here because you survived," Gideon said softly. "That's the first step. You're alive, and that's what matters right now." He gave her a small, reassuring nod. She looked at him, the fear in her eyes slowly fading, replaced by cautious curiosity. The storm outside raged for hours, howling like the call of some alien predator. Inside, the cabin was warm but dim, lit by the flickering light of the heater and a single lantern on the table. Gideon brewed a small cup of hot tea, careful not to burn himself. He handed it to her once she was able to sip without choking. Alara's hands shook as she held the cup, but the warmth seeped into her slowly, reviving her senses. I I don't even know who to contact," she admitted. Her voice trembled, but her words carried a quiet bravery, the kind that only appeared in people who had survived something terrible. "You won't need to call anyone tonight," Gideon said. "The storm's too bad. You stay here, eat, drink, and warm up. That's your job for now." He watched her, gauging her strength. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what comes next." The night stretched on, and outside the blizzard was relentless. Inside, Gideon checked the perimeter one last time, ensuring no stray wildlife or hazards approached the cabin. The snow had piled against the walls, and the wind tugged at the roof, but the structure held firm. When he returned, he found Alara dozing lightly, her hands tucked under her chin, her breathing steadier. For a long moment, Gideon simply watched her. He had lived alone for years, trusted only the wind, the land, and the small herd of genetically modified sheep that roamed his property. Now, for the first time in a long time, another human presence occupied the cabin. He wondered what her arrival would mean for his lonely life. Hours passed, and the storm began to soften, its anger replaced by a quiet, eerie calm. Outside, the snow reflected the pale light of distant moons. Inside, the warmth of human connection slowly began to fill the cabin. Gideon knew that this night was only the beginning. Someone had left her in the storm, but he would make sure she survived. And in doing so, he might find that even in the coldest, most isolated corners of the galaxy, life could still bloom unexpectedly. The wind had softened, but the world beyond the cabin was still harsh, unyielding. And yet, inside, a fire of human resilience flickered. One survivor alone had found another. And that small spark was enough to begin a story of survival, trust, and the quiet strength that humans could muster, even when abandoned by everyone else. The storm had passed, leaving the world outside coated in soft white snow. The sun peeked through the pale clouds, scattering light across the frozen plains. Inside the cabin, the air smelled faintly of tea and wood smoke. Gideon sat near the heater, watching the woman he had saved from the blizzard. Her chest rose and fell steadily now, no longer rattled by shivers. She was awake. Alara Voss blinked against the dim morning light, her eyes adjusting slowly. She tried to sit up, but the blankets weighed heavy on her, and a dull ache ran through her muscles. Gideon leaned forward. "Easy," he said gently. "You've been through a lot, don't rush." Alara looked around, confusion written across her face. The cabin felt strange to her, different from anything she had ever known. There were no walls lined with machinery, no soft beds, no bustling people, just snow outside, a small stove, a few shelves, and the faint hum of life inside this little shelter. She shivered slightly, not from cold but from uncertainty. "Where am I?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "You're safe," Gideon said, resting a hand on the table between them. "Out here, 300 kilometers from the nearest settlement. This is my home. I'm Gideon Harrow." Alara tried to speak again, but her throat was dry and the words stuck. Gideon offered her a cup of warm tea. Hesitantly, she took it, her fingers brushing against his. The warmth of the cup seeped into her hands, and slowly a sense of calm returned. "Thank you," she murmured. She glanced at him, studying his face. The sun caught the lines of his weathered skin, the quiet determination in his eyes. There was a strength in him that made her feel safe, yet she couldn't shake the memory of being left behind in the snow, abandoned and alone. "Who left you?" Gideon asked softly. He did not press, only waited, letting her words come when she could. My husband," she finally said. "He never came for me. I was supposed to meet him and then nothing." Her voice cracked. "I didn't know if anyone would find me." Gideon nodded. He understood. The colonies were harsh places and people often disappeared. Sometimes it was chance. Sometimes it was fate. But out here help came slowly, if at all. "You're not alone anymore," he said simply. "I found you, that's what matters. We'll figure out the rest later." Alara nodded, though her eyes remained wary. She took another sip of tea, letting the warmth spread through her body. For the first time in days, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. After a while, Gideon got up and began moving around the cabin. He gathered firewood, checked the small supply of food, and opened the storage crates. "We'll need to get you fully warm and fed, and then we'll talk about what comes next," he said. Alara watched him work. There was a rhythm to his movements, a quiet efficiency. Every action was deliberate, every glance purposeful. She realized then that he was more than just a rancher. He was someone who had survived out here alone for years. Someone who understood the land, the weather, and how to live in a place that offered little mercy. After breakfast, a simple meal of nutrient paste and rehydrated fruit, Gideon sat across from her. "I need to know more," he said. "About you, about what happened. If we're going to survive out here, I need to understand your skills, what you can do, what you know." Alara hesitated. She didn't want to admit how little she knew about surviving alone, but she also realized that hiding it would not help. She took a deep breath. I've lived in a city," she said. "I know technology, data systems, communication equipment. I've never been out here. I don't know how to hunt or survive in the snow." Gideon nodded, not with judgment but with understanding. "Then we'll teach each other. You'll learn and I'll learn from you. This place, it demands teamwork if you want to stay alive." Over the next few hours, Gideon showed her how to check the perimeter for hazards, how to keep the stove running efficiently, and how to recognize the subtle signs of weather change. He didn't rush her, but he was patient, explaining each step in simple terms. Alara listened, absorbing the information. She was quick, intelligent, and careful. By the end of the day, she had learned how to reinforce the cabin's small defenses against the cold, how to ration the supplies, and even how to improvise minor repairs using whatever tools were on hand. "I didn't know I could do this," she said quietly as they worked together to fix a small crack in the cabin's outer wall. "I thought I would just freeze out there." "You survived the storm," Gideon said. "That means you're stronger than you think. Out here, strength isn't just muscle, it's mind, heart, and will." Alara looked at him, considering his words. She had spent so long thinking of herself as weak, dependent on someone else to guide her. But in these past hours, she had realized she could make choices, take action, and even help someone else survive. As evening fell, the cold outside returned, creeping into the edges of the cabin. Gideon stoked the fire and poured 2 cups of tea. They sat across from each other, watching the flames dance. Outside, the snow stretched endlessly, unbroken and silent. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" Alara asked suddenly. Gideon smiled faintly. "Lonely, sure, but you get used to it. You learn to find peace in the silence. And now, well, I guess I won't be lonely for a while." He gave a small nod toward her. Alara felt a warmth she hadn't felt before, different from the fire. It was the simple comfort of human presence, of someone caring enough to save her and let her stay. She smiled faintly, a spark of gratitude and trust forming in her heart. The next morning, Gideon took her outside to survey the land. The snow had settled into smooth drifts, and the pale sun reflected off the icy plains. Gideon pointed to distant ridges, showing her landmarks and safe routes. "Out here, everything can look the same," he said. "If you don't know the land, you can get lost. I want you to remember these points. Safety depends on knowing where you are." Alara nodded, focusing on each ridge and slope. She repeated the names Gideon gave them: North Ridge, Frost Hollow, Silver Pass. It was strange, memorizing names for empty spaces, but she found herself enjoying the process. She was learning. She was living. As the day wore on, small, unusual signs began to appear. Footprints that didn't match any animal Gideon had ever seen. Tiny glimmers of light in the snow, fading as quickly as they appeared. A soft hum, almost imperceptible, vibrating through the ground. Gideon noticed them first, his trained eyes catching the subtle disturbances. "Do you hear that?" he asked, crouching to examine the snow. Alara listened, tilting her head. At first she heard nothing, then a faint vibration underfoot. "It's like a song," she said uncertainly. "Not a song," Gideon said. "Something else, something unfamiliar." He stood, eyes scanning the horizon. "Keep your eyes open. This land has secrets. Not all of them are dangerous, but some could be." Alara followed his gaze, feeling a mixture of fear and excitement. Out here every day was a lesson. Every moment, a chance to discover something new. She realized that survival wasn't just about warmth and food. It was about awareness, adaptability, and trust. And for the first time, she felt she was beginning to understand what it meant to survive in this world. Night fell, and they returned to the cabin. They shared a simple meal and sat quietly, listening to the wind whisper across the plains. Neither spoke much, but both were thinking about the strange signs they had noticed. It was clear that Earth-Renine had more to offer than isolation and snow. Something or someone was watching, waiting. Gideon finally broke the silence. "We'll keep watch," he said. "Together. You're learning fast, and I'm glad. But this land, it will test you. Don't be afraid. You're stronger than you know." Alara nodded, feeling a quiet determination. She had survived a storm, learned the first rules of survival, and begun to trust a man she barely knew. And in that trust she found courage. Outside, the snow sparkled under the twin moons, serene yet full of mystery. Inside the cabin, a small fire burned, the flicker of flames reflecting in their eyes. Two humans, brought together by chance, were learning to face a world that was bigger, colder, and stranger than either of them had imagined. And for the first time, Alara didn't feel helpless. She felt ready. The morning air on Earth-Renine was crisp, sharper than ever before. Gideon Harrow stepped outside the cabin, boots crunching over the frost-covered ground. The sun had not yet risen fully, casting pale blue light across the snow. Alara Voss followed closely, her hands tucked into the sleeves of her thick coat. She had learned quickly how to walk in the snow, how to keep her balance, and how to watch for signs that the land was changing. Every day was a lesson, and she had absorbed them all with determination. "Look there," Gideon said, pointing to a series of small impressions in the snow. They were shallow, irregular, and unlike any animal tracks he had ever seen. "These aren't from the sheep or any local wildlife. Something passed through here last night." Alara knelt down, her fingers brushing the snow. The impressions were soft, almost deliberate, as if the creature that had made them had moved carefully, aware of its steps. "Could it be humans?" she asked, hope flickering in her voice. "No," Gideon replied, frowning. "No human would travel this far in the storm. Whoever or whatever it was, they're not like us." He scanned the horizon, his eyes narrowing. "Keep your eyes open and stay close." The day went on with a tense quiet. Alara helped Gideon check the cabin's perimeter, and together they reinforced weak spots in the walls. It was routine work, but neither of them spoke much. The tracks weighed on their minds, a silent warning that the isolation they had grown accustomed to might no longer be safe. Around midday, a soft, humming vibration began to pulse through the ground. It was faint at first, almost imperceptible, but it grew steadily, like the resonance of some hidden energy. Alara paused, placing her hand flat against the cold metal of the cabin's outer wall. "Do you feel that?" she asked. Gideon nodded. "I do. It's not natural. The snow doesn't make noise like this, and the wind isn't strong enough to cause it. Something is out there." Hours later, a strange shimmer appeared on the horizon. It was like sunlight dancing on ice, but irregular, moving in ways that defied the natural angles of reflection. Alara's breath caught. "Is that a mirage?" "No," Gideon said slowly, scanning the distant ridge. "That's something else. We need to watch carefully." He gestured for her to follow him to a higher point near the cabin, a small hill that gave them a clear view of the surrounding plains. From their vantage point, they could see faint, geometric shapes moving in the distance. They glowed softly, almost like lanterns, but their motion was too deliberate, too precise to be animals or natural light phenomena. Alara's eyes widened. "It's intelligent," she whispered. Gideon's jaw tightened. "Seems that way. And whatever it is, it's curious about us." He took a deep breath and turned to her. "We're going to need to be smart. Watch, learn, and be ready to act. You've already proven you can think on your feet. Now pay attention." The shapes drew closer and the hum beneath their feet strengthened. It was a soft, steady vibration, like the rhythm of a heartbeat, but alien and unfamiliar. Alara squatted to examine the snow near their hill, noticing that the tracks left by these entities were not footprints but small depressions, each lined with faint glimmers of light. "They move differently than anything I've seen," she said, intrigued rather than scared. "They leave patterns, not tracks." Gideon nodded, keeping his eyes on the horizon. "That's intelligence. They're observing. They want to know what's here, who we are, what we can do." For the next few hours, Gideon and Alara watched in tense silence. The strange entities moved across the frozen plain, pausing occasionally to emit a faint hum, almost as if communicating among themselves. Alara's mind raced. She had studied alien communications in theory, but this was real. This was the unknown reaching out to them. "I think," she said cautiously, "they're studying us, trying to figure out if we're a threat." Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Then we'll have to show them we can survive, that we're clever, careful, and not easy to underestimate." As the sun dipped lower in the sky, they retreated to the cabin, preparing for the night. Gideon taught Alara how to reinforce the cabin's energy shield, a low-level defensive measure designed not to harm, but to protect and signal presence. It was basic technology, but in combination with human ingenuity, it could create an advantage against the unknown. Alara worked alongside him, learning quickly. She was careful, methodical, and precise. Together, they adjusted the shield, making it responsive to movement, sound, and light. When it was complete, Gideon nodded in approval. "Good work. This will give us an edge if they try anything unusual." Night fell, and the glow of the alien shapes appeared once more on the horizon. The snow shimmered under the moonlight, reflecting their forms. The hum pulsed beneath their feet, and the temperature in the cabin seemed to drop slightly in response. Gideon and Alara sat close to the heater, hands brushing occasionally as they monitored the patterns outside. "They're not hostile, at least, not yet," Gideon said quietly. "But curiosity can turn into something else if we're careless." Alara nodded. "We'll be careful. And we'll learn what we can from them. Maybe they can teach us something, too." Hours passed in tense observation. Then something unexpected happened. One of the shapes moved closer to the cabin, pausing just at the edge of the snowfield. Its glow was brighter now, and the hum shifted in pitch. Alara leaned closer to the window, fascinated. "It's communicating," she whispered. Gideon's eyes narrowed. "Maybe, or maybe it's testing us. Either way, we need to respond carefully." Alara suggested a small experiment. Using a reflective panel she had found in the cabin, she angled it toward the glowing shape, sending a soft flash of light back. The shape paused, then pulsed in response. A simple pattern emerged, a sequence of 3 pulses repeated several times. Gideon smiled faintly. "Good thinking, you're learning fast." Alara's heart raced. She had gone from being lost, abandoned, and terrified to actively engaging with an unknown intelligence. The excitement mingled with fear, but she felt alive in a way she hadn't before. The night continued with this delicate dance of observation and response. The shapes never approached aggressively, nor did they retreat entirely. They lingered, curious and watchful, giving Gideon and Alara time to prepare, learn, and adapt. By the end of the night, a silent understanding had formed. The aliens, if that's what they were watching, learning, and testing. Gideon and Alara were not powerless. They had their minds, their ingenuity, and their willingness to adapt. And in this frozen, alien world, that was enough. As they finally rested, the wind outside had softened, carrying only the faint hum of distant curiosity. Alara looked at Gideon, a quiet determination in her eyes. "We can do this," she said. Gideon nodded, his gaze distant but calm. "Yes, we're humans, we survive, we learn, and we adapt. That's what makes us unstoppable." Outside, the glowing shapes lingered at the edge of the snowfield, observing silently. Inside, a small cabin on a frozen world was alive with warmth, light, and the resilience of two people who refused to be helpless. And in that moment, both humans and aliens learned something. Curiosity could be met with courage, and the unknown could be faced with intelligence and teamwork. The night passed, and the first light of dawn touched the snow once more. Gideon and Alara stepped outside again, ready to continue their silent study of the strange visitors. They were no longer just survivors. They were explorers, students of the unknown, and resilient representatives of humanity in a vast and mysterious galaxy. And somewhere in the shimmer of the distant shapes, it seemed the unknown was learning from them, too. The morning light spread slowly across Earth Renine, painting the frozen plains in shades of pale gold. Gideon Harrow stood outside his cabin, squinting against the snow's reflective glare. Alara Voss joined him, her eyes scanning the horizon for the glowing shapes they had observed the previous night. The alien visitors had remained distant but persistent, and the knowledge that they were still out there lingered in their minds like a quiet warning. "We need more information," Gideon said. His voice was low but firm. "I've watched these plains for years, and I know the land. Something isn't right. I think our neighbor left something behind, something important." Alara nodded, her breath forming small clouds in the cold morning air. "Do you mean technology?" she asked, curiosity lighting her eyes. She had learned quickly, adapting to the harsh environment and showing Gideon that she could think clearly under pressure. "Something that could explain the strange lights." Gideon's jaw tightened. "Yes, he was experimenting with alien tech, trying to protect the colony. He disappeared months ago, and now, we might be the only ones who can finish what he started." Together, they prepared to explore the abandoned homestead. It was a half-hour trek across deep snow, and the cold was biting, but Gideon moved with confidence, each step purposeful. Alara followed, carrying a small pack of tools Gideon had lent her, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had survived storms and strange visitors, but the idea of discovering unknown technology made her heart race. The homestead appeared through the snow like a shadow of the past. Its walls were partially collapsed, windows frosted over, and the ground around it littered with debris. Yet, despite its decay, there was a sense of anticipation, a hidden presence waiting to be uncovered. "Stay close," Gideon warned. "There may be sensitive equipment, we don't know what's active." Alara nodded, moving carefully beside him. They entered the building, the wooden floor creaking under their boots. Inside, frost coated the walls and broken furniture lay scattered. Gideon's gaze swept the room, noting markings on the walls and faint circuits glowing under the snow-dusted floorboards. "There," he said, pointing to a hidden panel beneath the table. With a practiced hand, he slid it open, revealing a small compartment. Inside was a datapad and a collection of alien devices, unfamiliar in design but clearly engineered with precision. Alara's fingers itched to touch them. "Wow," she whispered. "This is incredible. He really was working with something advanced." Gideon picked up the datapad, brushing off the frost. The screen flickered to life, revealing schematics and notes written in a combination of human and alien symbols. It was clear that the neighbor had been attempting to create a defensive system, a way to protect the colony from unknown threats. Alara leaned closer, her eyes scanning the data. "He was trying to build something, but it's incomplete," she said. "These notes are detailed, but there's a part missing. The energy matrix isn't fully functional. He must have left it unfinished when he disappeared." Gideon frowned. "Then we finish it. We have to. Out here, survival isn't just about staying warm and fed. It's about preparation. This technology could make the difference between safety and danger." They spent hours studying the schematics, making careful notes and planning how to repair and activate the system. Alara's technical knowledge complemented Gideon's practical experience, and together they devised a method to reconstruct the incomplete device using available resources. As they worked, the alien shapes appeared again on the horizon, their soft glow reflecting on the snow. This time they lingered closer, observing with a quiet intelligence that was both unsettling and fascinating. Alara pointed to one of the shapes. "They're still watching," she said. "Maybe they're curious about what we're building." Gideon nodded. "Could be. Or they might be testing us. Either way, we need to proceed carefully. Let's show them that humans aren't helpless, that we can adapt and learn." Hours turned into evening, and the cold crept into the homestead despite their efforts. Gideon and Alara worked tirelessly, connecting circuits, adjusting energy flows, and testing the device in small increments. The air hummed faintly as the system powered up, responding to their careful adjustments. "Almost there," Gideon said, wiping sweat from his brow despite the freezing temperatures. "Just a few more calibrations." Alara's hands moved quickly, guided by both knowledge and intuition. "I think I've got it," she said, her voice filled with cautious excitement. She connected the final sequence, and the device emitted a low, steady hum. A soft glow spread across the homestead, illuminating the walls and reflecting in the frost. Gideon smiled, a rare expression of satisfaction on his weathered face. "Good work. You did it." Outside, the alien shapes paused, their glowing forms pulsing in rhythm with the hum of the activated system. It was as if they recognized the effort, the intelligence, and the determination of the humans before them. They did not retreat, nor did they advance. They watched, waiting, learning. Alara turned to Gideon, a mixture of awe and determination in her eyes. "We did it," she said softly. "We made something that works, something that can help protect the colony." "Yes," Gideon replied, "and it's just the beginning. This land, these plains, they'll keep testing us, but we're ready, together." They spent the night in the homestead, the glow of the device filling the space with warmth and light. Outside, the snow lay undisturbed, save for the faint pulses of the alien shapes watching from a distance. For the first time, Gideon and Alara felt a sense of control, a quiet confidence that human ingenuity could meet the challenges of this strange world. As dawn approached, the alien forms slowly retreated to the horizon, their glow fading but leaving a sense of presence. Gideon and Alara stepped outside, surveying the land with new eyes. The homestead was no longer just an abandoned relic. It was a center of potential, a place where humans could assert their intelligence and resilience against the unknown. Alara looked at Gideon. "Do you think they understand us?" "Maybe," he said, his gaze steady. "Or maybe they're just learning. Either way, we've proven something important. We're humans, we survive, we adapt, and we don't give up." The snow stretched endlessly around them, bright and cold, yet no longer threatening. In the glow of the activated system, the plains seemed alive with possibility. They had discovered the neighbor's secret, unlocked its potential, and in doing so, had taken a step toward securing their place in this world. Gideon placed a hand on Alara's shoulder. "Tomorrow we continue. We strengthen what we've built and we learn more about those shapes. We're not just survivors anymore. We're explorers, inventors, and guardians of this land." Alara smiled, feeling a sense of purpose she had never known. The fear of being abandoned, of being helpless, had faded. In its place was a determination to face the unknown, to learn and to thrive. She realized that survival was not just about enduring the cold or the storm. It was about understanding, adapting, and using every tool at their disposal. Together, they returned to the homestead, ready to face the challenges of the coming days. The alien shapes would remain a mystery, but they were no longer a threat. They were a puzzle, one that humans could approach with intelligence, creativity, and courage. As the sun rose higher, the snow sparkled, reflecting the light of a new day. Gideon and Alara looked out across the plains, their hearts steady, their minds focused, and their spirits unbroken. They were humans, and humans did not yield. In the quiet of the frozen world, with the hum of the neighbor's device filling the air, a new chapter of survival and discovery began. It was a chapter written not just in frost and snow, but in determination, ingenuity, and the unyielding spirit of two people who refused to be powerless. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the alien shapes watched, learning in their own quiet way. Perhaps they understood something of the human mind, its resilience, and its cleverness. Perhaps they did not. But one thing was certain. Gideon and Alara were no longer merely reacting. They were shaping the future of the land, one careful step at a time. The morning sun rose slowly over Earth-Renine, scattering gold across the endless snow. The wind was calm now, carrying only the faintest whisper of the distant alien shapes that had lingered near the homestead. Gideon Harrow stepped outside, boots crunching against the frosted ground, with Alara Voss beside him. Today felt different. There was a quiet tension in the air, as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was about to unfold. "We've done well," Gideon said softly, his eyes scanning the horizon. "But we can't be complacent. They're still out there, watching." Alara nodded. She had spent weeks learning the rhythms of the land, the signs of the storm, the patterns of the glowing shapes. She had learned to move quietly through snow, to anticipate changes, and to think clearly under pressure. Today, all of those skills would matter more than ever. Gideon checked the neighbor's device one final time. The low hum of energy filled the homestead, steady and strong. It was a defensive system, yes, but also a signal, an assertion that humans could adapt, innovate, and survive. The glowing lights of the alien shapes flickered on the horizon, closer than before. They were curious, intelligent, and cautious, but there was a new sharpness in their movements. "They're testing us," Gideon said. "We need to show them what humans are capable of." Alara adjusted a reflective panel near the device, carefully angling it to amplify the signal. "If this works the way we think it does, it should make our presence clear," she said. "It will show that we understand and that we can respond intelligently." Together, they activated the system fully. A soft pulse of energy spread across the homestead and into the surrounding snowfield. The alien shapes paused, their glow reacting to the new signal. They pulsed back, in patterns that seemed almost like language, though neither Gideon nor Alara understood it fully. Still, it was clear that the interaction was working. They were communicating, learning, and responding. For hours, they maintained the system, adjusting angles, energy flow, and reflective signals. They experimented with small movements and observations, testing the boundaries of the unknown. Each time the aliens responded, they learned something new about the world, about each other, and about the resilience of humans. By midday, a breakthrough occurred. One of the alien shapes approached closer than ever before, its glow brighter and more intricate. It hovered at the edge of the snowfield as if waiting for a sign. Alara leaned toward Gideon, whispering, "I think they're acknowledging us, not as prey, not as strangers, but as something intelligent." Gideon smiled faintly. "We've earned respect. That's all humans ever need: understanding, intelligence, and courage." They continued to interact with the shapes, refining their signals, learning to anticipate patterns. Alara's technical mind worked in tandem with Gideon's practical experience. Together, they discovered that the aliens responded not only to light, but to rhythm, movement, and energy pulses. By combining all these elements, they created a communication loop, a silent conversation between human and alien intelligence. As evening approached, the horizon shimmered with dozens of shapes, moving in coordinated patterns, almost like a dance. Gideon and Alara watched in awe. The land itself seemed to respond to their presence, no longer a threat but a stage for human ingenuity and resilience. "It's incredible," Alara said, her voice barely above a whisper. "They're beautiful and they're learning from us too." "Yes," Gideon said, "and we're learning from them. That's how survival works. You adapt, you observe, and you respond. That's what humans do best." Night fell, and the twin moons of Earth-Renine cast silver light over the snow. Gideon and Alara set up the device for its final test. They would demonstrate not only their survival but their creativity and intelligence, showing that humans could face the unknown and thrive. Alara adjusted the energy pulses, synchronizing them with rhythmic movements of the reflective panels. Gideon mirrored the motions, creating patterns that echoed across the snowfield. The aliens responded immediately, matching and then improvising, creating a silent exchange that was both tense and harmonious. Hours passed in this delicate interaction. The cold nipped at their fingers and faces, but neither noticed. Their minds were focused entirely on the exchange, learning, adapting, and proving that intelligence and ingenuity could overcome isolation and uncertainty. Finally, the alien shapes moved back, forming a perfect circle around the homestead. The glow was steady and calm, a sign of recognition. Gideon and Alara stepped back, exhausted but elated. They had survived not just the storm, not just the unknown land, but the ultimate test of intelligence and adaptability. Alara turned to Gideon, a quiet smile on her lips. "We did it. They understand us." Gideon placed a hand on her shoulder. "Yes, and more than that, we've proven that humans can face the unknown and respond with skill, creativity, and courage. That's the spirit that carries us, no matter where we are." The next morning, the alien shapes had receded slightly, but their presence was unmistakable. They had left patterns in the snow, a form of acknowledgement that humans were no longer merely surviving, they were respected. Gideon and Alara surveyed the land, the hum of the device still filling the homestead. They had learned to read the subtle signs of the environment, to anticipate the movements of the unknown, and to communicate across the vast divide of alien intelligence. And in doing so, they had discovered something fundamental. Human resilience was not just about endurance, it was about curiosity, creativity, and the willingness to learn. Alara looked out over the plains. "I used to feel helpless," she said softly, "lost, abandoned. But now I feel capable, alive." Gideon nodded. "That's what survival does. It teaches you who you are. Out here in this harsh world you find strength you never knew existed, and the best part, you're never really alone when you work together." Together they took a careful walk across the snowfield, examining the patterns left by the aliens. Each glimmer and pulse was a lesson, a challenge, and a confirmation of the bond they had formed. Human ingenuity, combined with courage and observation, had allowed them to survive and thrive where others might have failed. The days passed with continued observation and adaptation. Gideon and Alara perfected the neighbor's device, expanding its reach and refining its responses. They documented their findings, noting how the aliens reacted to different energy pulses, reflective signals, and rhythms. Every experiment strengthened their confidence and understanding. One morning, they noticed a new pattern in the distance, a series of lights moving slowly across the horizon. Gideon and Alara exchanged glances, anticipation tingling in the air. They had come so far, learned so much, and now the next challenge awaited. "Are you ready?" Gideon asked, Alara nodded. We can handle this. Together, they activated the device and prepared their signals. The alien shapes moved closer, curious and deliberate. The air hummed with energy, and the snowfield seemed alive with possibility. They began their final interaction, each pulse, each reflection, a testament to human ingenuity. The aliens mirrored their movements, responded to their energy, and engaged in a silent dialogue that bridged the gap between species. It was a moment of pure intelligence, cooperation, and understanding. Hours later, the shapes retreated, leaving a faint trail of glowing patterns in the snow as a mark of acknowledgement. Gideon and Alara stood together, exhausted but triumphant. They had survived the storm, learned to master the land, discovered the neighbor's secrets, and engaged with an alien intelligence without fear. Alara smiled at Gideon. "We did more than survive," she said. "We proved that humans can meet the unknown and adapt. We're not powerless." "No," Gideon said, looking across the horizon. "Humans are unstoppable when we combine courage, creativity, and intelligence. That's the lesson of this land, of this world. That's the spirit of humanity." The snow sparkled in the light of the twin moons, and the distant hum of the alien shapes faded into the silence of the frozen plains. But Gideon and Alara knew that the lessons they had learned, the resilience they had built, and the intelligence they had demonstrated would stay with them forever. And in that quiet, endless landscape, two humans stood together, warm, alive, and unyielding, proof that humanity's spirit could endure anything, thrive anywhere, and illuminate even the coldest, most mysterious corners of the galaxy. The wind whispered across the snow, carrying a quiet promise. The future belonged to those who dared to learn, to adapt, and to persist. Gideon and Alara had done exactly that. They were humans, and humans did not yield.